kind of on the Dahlia picture because that is going to be our program today. And thanks so much, everybody, for your slides. I love them. I love getting them. And if I forget to share them, just email me and I'll put them in next month. I get a lot of emails, so sometimes I forget what I'm doing. But Landry, I think, lost the sound part of the program. Oh, Landry, is that true? You've sent me a little note saying you've lost your sound. Okay, so I am going to introduce today's speaker. Just let me get my email and I will do that. Sorry, Landry, I wonder what's wrong with your, what is wrong with your thing? Landry, how much, where is it? Okay, here it is. Okay, sorry for the delay. I'm looking for the introduction that Landry has. Okay, so our speaker today, Deborah Dietz, has been addicted to dahlias for over 30 years when she began showing dahlias in competition in 1986. She has grown dahlias in Golden Gate Park since 1993. She is an American Dahlia Society senior judge and on the American Dahlia Society Mentor Hall of Fame for passing on her addiction to so many people. Deborah's Dahlia 101 lecture has been a feature at several national shows, and she has edited the e-newsletter of the Dahlia Society of California since 2002, and the website for that is sfdahlia.org. She also asks that we announce that she is going to sell dahlia plants, not tubers, but actual plants on April 22nd. And so anyone interested in buying plants from her can email her. I'm sure she'll tell us more about this when she's speaking, and she will send an Excel spreadsheet of what is currently available. And then someone will go to San Francisco to pick up the plants. So if people are interested in that, they might want to get together so that only one person has to go and pick up the plants. But I will let Deborah tell you more about that when she comes on. And I believe you're here already, Deborah. There she is, there she is, good. Okay, so I'm gonna spotlight you so that you can speak to everybody. And when you're ready, you can share your slides.
I understand. I have a little thing that says host disabled attendee screen.
Oh, a minor detail. Let me fix that. Okay, welcome, Deborah. We're so glad to have you. I'm sure Landry would have been even more flowery in her introduction, but her audio has gone out, but I am so happy to welcome you. And we have a lot of flower lovers here and we can't wait to hear you and see your slide.
Excellent. All right.
Woo!
There we go. All right. I am Deborah Dietz. I'm with the Dahlia Society of California. You can see our website, sfdahlia.org. And I hope that many of you will check out our website because there's a lot of very good information on growing dahlias there. Actually, Martha, I think that you did a great introduction and I wanted to thank you and Landry for inviting me. So just to start, everybody, I wanted to say I'm perfectly comfortable if you have questions during my presentation. And so if you feel like asking a question, why don't you type into the conversation area and Martha will sort of regulate the questions, because sometimes questions are much better right at the time when we've got a slide in front of us. So you can see from this picture, this is Golden Gate Park. If any of you have not been, I recommend it. It is just to the east of the big green conservatory. So right now, we don't have any car traffic there. So it is a bit of a hiking trek in, which has been tough on the volunteers who do the dahlias, but it will be glorious. July, August, September, and October are our beautiful months. So I was going to say, had any of you seen gardens with dahlias, but after seeing Carrie's amazing pictures, I know that you have seen dahlias in gardens. What about using them in arrangements? Yes, I saw an arrangement from you all already. How about a wedding? This is from 1940. And one of these bridesmaids' daughters actually had a dahlia wedding about 20 years ago here in San Francisco. It was very fun. How many of you have been to a dahlia competition? Oh, Martha, yay, yay, I see your hand. We have 5 competitions here in the Bay Area in non-COVID times. I would definitely recommend you to the San Leandro Dahlia Society one, to the San Francisco Dahlia Society one, and to the Heirloom Expo up in Santa Rosa, usually in August and September. This is one of my favorite pictures. It just kind of gives you that Monet feeling about how it feels to be in a dahlia garden in the sunshine. And this is my testimonial picture, because this is in Golden Gate Park in December. These are my volunteers who are helping me cut down my canes, and look at the bouquets in the middle of December. So my dahlias start blooming in the end of April, and they bloom all the way to December. What other plant will do that for you? I mean, if you have an iris blooms, you cut it, and then you wait 11 and a half more months for another iris. Not so with dahlias. The more you cut dahlias, the happier they are. So, based on my conversations with Martha and Landry, I heard that you all would like to talk about dahlia propagation, growing, dahlia types, gopher techniques, and a little bit about dahlia competition. So here we go. There's 4 ways to propagate dahlias: tubers, cuttings, pot roots, and seeds. Tubers, the English call these chicken legs. You can see why. Tubers are a very popular way to do it because they are easy to transport. And so when you order these from commercial growers, this is what you would get in the mail. Cuttings are getting to be much more popular. I noticed one of your members was in England, and in England, most proper dahlia growers grow from cuttings, not tubers. And for some reason, cuttings tend to minimize disease also. So you can grow them from cuttings. The latest in commercial dahlia growing is to do these little oasis cubes and be able to send these in plastic clamshells through the mail. So what you're really looking for is a viable method of transporting dahlia germplasm, and this does it. So it's very cute. We, the Dahlia Societies of San Francisco and San Leandro, usually in non-COVID times, have an annual dahlia tuber and plant sale. And this is the kind of thing that we sell based on cuttings and tubers. Seeds. Seeds are really interesting. These are seed heads from my backyard. up close. And here you are with Diamond Penny to give you a sense of size. The problem with Dahlia seeds is that dahlias don't breed true. Dahlias are really complicated. Most of you know that human beings have 23 chromosomes, right? And we have 2 strands of DNA, and that makes the double helix. Dahlias have 46 chromosomes and are octoploid, meaning they have 8 strands of DNA. Plus they have transposons, which mean that little slices of DNA material jump off of one strand, glom onto another strand, and most of the time, that's a terrible, fatal mistake. But if you do it enough, occasionally, it has spectacular results. So dahlias are always giving us new surprises. So you can grow seeds, and that's how we get new varieties. But they say that for every 10,000 seeds you grow, you get one that might be a prize winner. So I was going to walk you through kind of quickly how I process tubers. First, I put them in a little dahlia tuber spa with a little water and bleach. And that way I can clean them off until I can see where to divide them. I have this very snazzy oscillating tool, and I cut them so that clump you just saw divided into all of these pieces. Then I pop them into milk cartons where I have their names. And what's nice about these milk cartons is when it's time to plant, look at this. I have a 14-inch tall plant and an entire brick of roots. So I can just dig a hole in the ground and plant them. It's kind of pop and play. So where do these milk cartons go? They go up to my loft, which is the warmest area of my little house in San Francisco. And why? Because dahlias will only germinate when they have a constant 62 to 65 degree heat range. So if you put a tuber in the ground, ask yourself how long it will take for your ground to start having a constant 62 to 65 degree heat range. It takes quite a while. Whereas in my loft, it happens pretty quickly. Then I take them to my little teeny greenhouse where I have 18 hours of light a day. And that gives them just a little kick in the pants to grow a little faster. You can see I have lots of little cuttings and little starts and little greenhouses. And then I have a front deck, which I have converted into a misting room. And dahlias love misting at this stage. Then they finally go out to my back deck to harden off. So you can see my dahlias get a lot of little trips before they actually go into their forever garden. And so the ones that I will have for sale are the ones that have already been hardened off. So where do you grow dahlias? Well, some of you already know quite successfully, like Carrie, who can make those great big dahlias, but you need at least a half a day of sun or more. You need loose soil, well-drained, and a pH about 7. So if you've been doing good composting, that should be about right. Ideally, for competition people, you'd like them isolated from pets. But I have a friend in Tiburon who has interwoven her 70 dahlia plants with 3,000 other plants, and it's spectacular. And lastly, dahlias want to be bottom water, not sprayed over the top. So here's Golden Gate Park. Here I have some of my volunteers helping me plant. And you can see I have a bottom watering system with this plastic pipe there. Dahlias also would like a good stake, because if the wind comes, it just shatters your heart to lose branches and things. So put the stake in before you plant. Otherwise, you could impale their poor little roots. I'm including these pictures because I know you all out in El Cerrito can get a lot of sun. And so in places like that, a good sunshade will really help protect your plants. They come in different amounts of opacity, and you could figure out what works in your garden. Here's a guy in San Jose who covered an entire acre on his mountaintop with sunshade. And as you can see, in a couple places, he double shaded because red tends to fade a little bit, and this guy likes his blue ribbons. So he double shaded with an umbrella under the sunshade. Amazing. The reason I'm showing this picture is all four of these are Mingus Nicole, and all four of them have exactly the same genetic material. And you look how different they are. And that's just because of, were they shaded, were they not shaded, were they in good dirt, were they in different dirt, were they getting fed regularly, were they not getting fed regularly, were they disbudded? It really goes to show you that there is an art to dahlia growing as well as just sticking them in the dirt. So a lot of people say, well, Deborah, in the Bay Area, we don't get a freeze, so why should I dig them up? There's a few reasons. Number one, occasionally we do get a freeze, or if we get so much rain, your tubers will rot, or as many of you know, those damn gophers can eat even during the wintertime. Also, you get diminishing returns, meaning that every year as you get more and more and more tubers, you're putting in less and less and less nutrients. And so the ones that do come up tend to be smaller, little kind of wispy, wimpy little stems, and not very happy. Another good idea is that you could swap or trade your extra tubers for some really wonderful new things. And last but not least, you always want to get rid of the ones that aren't doing well in your garden. Okay, this is a sophomore clump. This one was left in for 2 seasons. You can see what happens. Terrible, terrible. Took 3 of us to lift this up. This is what our tuber clumps in Golden Gate Park look like. We usually dig them out in January, February, and March. All right, how many eyes do people see? 3, exactly, well done, 3. These little teeny red dots are eyes. And what you're seeing here is the eye closest to the front is almost attached to the stem. So that the eyes of dahlia tubers are only found on this little neck area that attaches to the stem. If the neck is broken, it's like your neck were broken. You could do without an arm, you could do without a leg. A broken neck invalidates the whole tuber. So there are few alternatives to dividing. You could leave them in the well-drained soil and cover them with a big 5-gallon bucket. That acts as sort of a greenhouse, and it also keeps some of the rain off of them. Or you could put the entire clump with a lot of soil around it in a cardboard box, cover it with more soil, and in the springtime, pull it out and divide it in half or thirds and replant. That's the easiest way to go. All right, I am showing you this because it is a catalog of dahlia tubers for sale. You can see $10, $7.50. Now think about it. This catalog comes from 1926. $10 in 1926 was a lot of money. You saw everything that my dahlias go through to become a plant. $10 was 2 days' wages for somebody. So these days, the most I have seen for a dahlia tuber this year was $37, which for most people is not 2 days' wages. So I would say that dahlias have become a good deal. But I showed this just because I thought, wow, 1926. So most of you have seen some kind of dahlias, and based on carries, you know that dahlias can go over 14 inches. The largest one I have ever seen is 18 inches across. It was almost a parasol. And the smallest ones are tinier than 2 inches. And if you bring these mignon singles to a show and they're larger than a quarter, they're disqualified. So I think about them kind of as the Great Danes and the Chihuahuas of the Dahlias. So here's our president with her Clyde's choice. And clearly she is a full-grown woman. And this dahlia is bigger than her head. This is a nice one. You can see a quarter. And this is huge. Now these look really nice, but until you have perspective, you don't know how big they are. It took 2 people to carry these to the competition table. These are the little teeny mignon singles, and they make wonderful border plants or little potted plants. So we divide dahlias into 2 types, fully double and open centered. And I thought I would just walk you through those forms. And if you have questions, again, let Martha know. So these are the types of dahlias, and I'm going to give you examples. Firstly, we have what we call formal decorative. Do you guys remember Esther Williams, and she had those bathing caps? I think of formal decoratives as Esther Williams bathing caps. They're just perfect. Every petal just fits just right. And these and balls are the longest lasting of cut dahlias. So a good FYI. Sometimes these little formal decoratives get a little twisted, and we call them informal decoratives. They could be my favorite form because I like how crazy and rambunctious they are. This one has gone 14 inches in Golden Gate Park, and I hold them up like pom-poms. Sometimes the petals, instead of being flat and twirly, roll up very tight, like a little cactus spine, and we call them straight cactus dahlias. And sometimes they curve upwards, the spines curve upwards, and we call them incurved cactuses. And sometimes they curve any way they want, and they don't quite fold all the way over. So we call them semi-cactuses. And they're just a great, they stand out anywhere. Now, back in the 1960s, in South Africa, Cyril Higo looked out in his garden and said, "Something has happened to my dahlia petals. What is it?" And it turned out that it looked like somebody had grated a fork over the end of each one of the dahlia petals and laciniated them or fimbriated them. And that started a whole new class of dahlias called laciniation. Look what happens when you, it looks like they explode. So laciniation is just gonzo. Also in the 1950s and early 60s, people started noticing that instead of doing that Esther Williams sort of thing, some of the dahlias had petals that were cupping up. And so when they sat on their stems and floated in the breeze, they looked kind of like water lilies floating on the airstream. And so these became the water lily type of dahlias. I love water lilies for a dinner party because instead of having a big bouquet in a table where you're constantly kind of peering over and under, you could float a stream of dahlias, water lily dahlias, down the center of the table and still have good conversation. These are just exquisite. In competition, we often show these floating to show that they are perfect water lilies. Then there are 3 types of ball dahlias, and the ideas of balls are to be perfectly globular. And these are the longest lasting dahlias as a cut dahlia that we have. And the 3, they go all the way from little tiny 1-inch pom-poms clear up to 8-inch globes. This is a pom-pom, unless you think that little tiny pom-poms grow on little tiny plants. My friend Dick Porter is 6'3", and he specializes in pom-poms. Look how big, how tall his plant is. I actually had a pom-pom plant that I grew down in Pescadero, right next to a sheep pasture. And I would get bunches of sheep, you know the word, sheep manure. And my little tiny pom-pom grew 11.5 feet tall. I had to use a stool to cut off my blooms. Pom-poms also make beautiful arrangements, and I love to put them particularly in my bathroom for some reason. In the 1980s, a new form developed where the petals tipped up, kind of like little canoes, and we called it a stellar form. So we are constantly developing new forms. My favorite is anytime a dahlia doesn't fit the typical 21 forms, we call it a novelty. And novelty is my favorite. Look at this craziness. This is called Holly Hill Spider Woman, and she's just crazy. She's about 8 inches across, and you can't tell whether she's crawling at you or just hissing. So much fun. Here she is on the plant. Now, the open-centered dahlias are really fun for a couple reasons. Number one, the bees love them. So if you have a pollinator garden, you want some open-centered dahlias. Number two, they tend to be a little closer to the wild dahlia. And so they're a little hardier, and they kind of act like weeds. The most exotic of these is called anemone. I did a close-up here because the center of an anemone has these enclosed tubules. And it took a long time for breeders to figure out that if you clipped the edges of these tubules, butterflies could send their long schnozolas down through these tubules and actually pollinate other anemones. So for 60 years, we had 3 anemones. And then suddenly, in the last 15 years, anemones have gone crazy. Look at these. My brothers called these fried eggs, but they're crazy anemones. Are these exquisite? You can tell I like anemones. Probably when Cortez marched on Montezuma in Mexico in the 1400s, this is the kind of dahlias that he saw there. They were single 8 petals around them, and the Aztecs used them for a foodstuff. Montezuma sent them back to Spain as a tuber, like potatoes. And they also used the stems, because the stems are hollow, for all kinds of interesting agricultural and plumbing purposes. The singles are really lovely. This one is particularly cute, and it has been in continuous competition since 1882. Pretty snazzy. Back in the 1700s, in a little garden in France, a botanist looked out in his backyard and said, "Oh my goodness, something happened." And he ran down and he said, "Ah, my single dahlia, regarde les colorettes." This became colorette dahlias, and they all have these funny little petaloids in the center. And what's fun is you can see oftentimes they're in contrasting color to the petals around them. So these are quite gay. Bumble Rumble is actually quite a big collarette, maybe 6 inches across. Then we have a funny one where the 8 petals, instead of laying flat, curled up. And for some reason, it's called orchid. And those are really quite stunning. These little teeny ones are called peonies. And they're very small and make great little border plants or potted plants. This one, Hank, with this dark foliage, this foliage is almost black sometimes. I think if the Munsters had a dahlia, this would be the Munster bride dahlia. This is another peony. The little tiny ones I told you about that have to be the size of a quarter are called mignon singles. And these were bred right here in San Francisco and named after one of those green turtles. You know, the kids' Ninja Turtles. Here is an orchid with petaloids. What we call it an orchette. So, looking at all those, we know that there are 15 recognized colors. I won't tell you what a white or pink dahlia looks like. You can guess those. But I will say that right now, breeders are pushing for new colors. We now have 4 tricolor dahlias, where you spot 4 colors on a dahlia. black. People have been pushing since the early 20s for the blackest dahlia they can get. Theoretically, we could have a green dahlia, but most people tell you that they're not really interested in growing a green dahlia. So the breeders aren't real interested. And what about blue? Unfortunately, the early dahlias were developed before blue was even a color. It took another 100 million years for blue to become a possible color. So the only way we'll ever get a blue dahlia is if it's transgenic. If we take something from a hyacinth or a bachelor button or a delphinium and somehow or another graft it on to the genome of a dahlia. But here is a beautiful flame-colored dahlia. And sometimes flames are a little genetically unstable and will sport a weird little extra color. It's a beautiful dark blend. Dark blend. This is something called two-tone, where you have a dominant color in the middle and an entirely different color on the outside. This is one of my favorite bicolors. It's called Jessica. Doesn't it look like she has wild red fingernails? Beautiful bicolor. Bicolors make great arrangements. Variegated. This is 49er in honor of our San Francisco 49ers. Unfortunately, like many things, variegated can be very genetically unstable. So you can see these two rolfs are on the same plant. One is gorgeously variegated and one is not. Princess Page. Here is a true tricolor. You can spot yellow, magenta, and white. Another bright red, yellow, and white. So here is one of our members with a gorgeous, super dark red called Kenora Macaque B. This was named because the breeder was going through chemotherapy and he hated his macaque bee. But he said it felt like this dark red blood was running through his veins. But you can see in the garden, these dark red ones are almost black. All right. So that was it for dahlia types and colors. Now we're going to get into a little bit of dahlia problems. All right, if any of you saw this in the garden, what would you think? And this is really prevalent this time of year. This is earwigs. Earwigs overnight can ravage whole plants. So you definitely want to put out some snail bait that covers earwigs as well. I use something called Sluggo Plus because it's safe for my birds and other plants. And in Golden Gate Park, we have to be completely green. What about this? If you see these little crazy labyrinths in your leaves, this is caused by leaf miner. And you can use something called Captain Jack's Dead Bug, which is also a green solution. All right, now imagine you have gorgeous dahlia plants all over except one, and it just looks terrible. And every day it looks worse. What's your diagnosis? Gophers. And man, it just It just kills me when I see that. So what's the solution? We have a commercial grower who has 700 above ground plastic dahlia boxes and it works. He has no gopher trouble, but that's a little drastic and it's not very attractive. So I have another friend who went and joined one of those fancy schmancy retirement homes in Southern California. And they let him grow dahlias, but they would only give him one row inside their public garden. So he decided to grow on the outside of their fence. But unfortunately, that was right on the field where there were thousands of gophers. So he set up this Wycomo device, and it works on detection, and it sets off a little alarm. And he says this is the third year he has used it, and it has worked like a charm. So there you have it. And lastly, but not leastly, here's my two favorite gopher thwart methods. One is my kitty. I have a friend who actually trained her kitty because she lives out in the countryside where there is an army of gophers. She trained her kitty to catch gophers. Secondly, gopher baskets. This is a commercial gopher basket. They cost about $10 or $11. I don't like them very much, but they will work. Even better are these gopher baskets, which we make ourselves. And our website has the pattern for them. And we sink them right in the ground and put the young plant in the center of them. We use hardware cloth. Here is our Dahlia Society. Last February, so a year ago, last February, just before the COVID closed down, we all got to make a gopher basket as a way so that everybody knew how to do it. So if there's any questions about that, you can definitely go to our website and get the pattern for how to make your own gopher baskets. These are three of the things that we use. I don't use the pesticidal oil anymore, and I don't use Serenade anymore. I use instead stylet oil, JMS stylet oil. And this is just miraculous against mildew. And a good treatment for mildew is if you start early, before there is a problem. I grow dahlias, as you saw, clear into December without mildew in foggy San Francisco. So this stylet oil is just miraculous. All right, so let's talk about enjoyment of dahlias and a little exhibitionism. I love this cartoon. Somebody sent it to me. I wonder why. It says, I grow dahlia, I garden because it lets me unwind in an otherwise competitive world. And then she says, my dahlias could blow yours away. Dahlia people are very competitive, and it's very funny because we're all using clones of the same dahlias. So if you remember back to that picture that showed 4 pictures of Mingus Nicole, we talk about our secret sauce. What do you put in the hole when you're planting? And right now, in my secret sauce, I will tell you, I put mycorrhizae, which is the fungus that goes underground. I put a balanced fertilizer. I sprinkle about a tablespoon of cinnamon, which acts as a deterrent for nasty little worms. And sometimes I put a little bone meal. Other people like to put whatever their little secret sauce things are. Then also you can experiment. It's amazing. Certain dahlias prefer certain sun spots. And if you have an unhappy dahlia in one place, you can move it to another place. And it's astonishing how well it does. Or conversely, you take a great dahlia and you move it, it's not happy. So dahlias can be quite amazing that way. All right, how crazy are dahlia people? Dahlia people are nuts. This is about 2 o'clock in the morning. I am picking for a dahlia show. I have a little light. Can you see that light on my visor? Yes, so that I can see in the dark and I can pick the little teeny weeny dahlias so they'll be absolutely fresh in the morning. Nuts. I have these cool little carrying cases that will hold my dahlias, and I pop them in water as soon as I pick them. Here I am with my car full of dahlias. I take between 200 and 250 to any given show. It's really quite ridiculous. And then here you can see the judges judging the dahlias. And people say, is it just competition? No. What happens is if you have judges judging, it means that every year we have a list of the dahlias that win. And what that means is they're the ones with your strongest stems, the straightest stems, the brightest colors, the happiest leaves. And that means that every year, supposedly, our dahlias are getting healthier and stronger, better disease resistance. Look at this. This is a show. I really recommend. I saw Martha says she'd been to a show. I really recommend popping over to a show because all of the names of the dahlias are on the entry forms. And so you know what to request for next year. Here's the show in San Francisco. And of course, we do like our ribbons. Young and old. All right. So I am at the point where if you guys have been to a fireworks show, you know that at the end, they just hit you with 1,000 fireworks and explode at the end. But I could pause here if there are some questions first. Okay.
Yes, Deborah, a few people have written questions in the chat. So back to growing, I didn't want to interrupt you in spite of what you said. How much water do they need? I mean, are they drought tolerant by chance, or do they have to be watered a lot?
Dahlias are not drought tolerant, but if you have a basin for dahlias, they like to be very wet and then very dry because that forces their roots to go down farther. And the great thing about dahlias is they will talk to you. So in San Francisco, you never know if we're going to have one of those 50-degree days or if we're going to have one of those 85-degree days. So you can't say, I'll put them on a 3-day schedule. No. What you have to do is watch your dahlia. And if it's upright like a ballerina or a soldier, it has enough water. But as soon as it starts to wilt a little bit, you know it wants water. So in San Francisco, I can go 10 days without watering if we've had overcast, foggy days. Or if we get those glorious, sunny, hot days, I can go 3 days max. So that doesn't really answer your question, Martha, but it kind of gives you a spread.
Great. And uh, Pam says that she planted a dahlia several years ago and got foliage, but no flower. What was wrong with that?
That can happen, Pam. And I would suggest that you give it one more year. Sometimes they come in very late and don't develop flowers, or they didn't have adequate fertilizer. Dahlias are really heavy feeders. We competitive people actually foliar feed ours. Dahlias can take nutrients through their leaves. And so we do this special cocktail of things that we spray on our dahlias every 2 weeks for competition. It's crazy. But I would recommend, if you planted with fertilizer and then maybe once a month dug in a little fertilizer around the base, you should probably get flowers. Now, if at the second year there's no flowers coming from that plant, chuck it out, out, out. When in doubt, out.
Great. And about the powdery mildew, um, so you're recommending a spray, a foliar spray, and that is preventative, right? So that's before the mildew happens. So if you've had mildew in the past, would you just spray everybody just in case, or? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. About 8 days before you see mildew, it is already a problem. It's kind of like fleas. You never find one flea. So I actually, when I do this little foliar cocktail of mine, I usually put a liquid fertilizer. I use a little stylet oil. I use a little dishwashing soap, which acts as a sticker and holds what I've sprayed on my leaves on the leaves, so that I'm not just doing it to the ground. I'm actually keeping it on my plant. And that is a great little cocktail. And then sometimes I add some Captain Jack dead bug, which is a spinosad, which is a green way of treating, particularly in July and August. We have a lot of caterpillars because they fly in as butterflies and then eat their way through my dahlias in competition time as caterpillars.
Okay, and I wondered about deer. Do you have to protect them from deer? Probably.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Everything likes dahlias. What can I say? Caterpillars, earwigs, moles, gophers, and deer. When I grew in near the sheep pasture in Pescadero, I actually had a 12-foot high fence because, as you know, deer are prodigious jumpers. And I had to set my plants back a certain space because the deer noses could go through my fence about that far. And all of my dahlias were trimmed about that far in. Deer just break your heart that way. Stick to amaryllis and daffodils if you have deer.
Great. Okay. Well, that's all the questions that have appeared to me. So if other people have questions, they can add them. But why don't you go ahead with your fireworks?
So I'm just going to show you some of my favorite pictures of dahlias. And this one is a water lily called porcelain. Isn't it perfectly named? The heart of an anemone. Little tiny dahlias dancing in the sun. What a great arrangement, huh? One dahlia in an arrangement with some flax is plenty. Doesn't this look like it should be underwater? I tend to use pin frogs when I do my arrangements because they will hold dahlias. And a lot of people ask me if you should put additives in the water to keep dahlias lasting longer. The single most important thing to keep longer lasting dahlias is clean vases. Dahlias are pinocytotic, meaning they draw water up through little tiny capillary tubes in their stems. And every time there's a microscopic piece of dust or plankton or bacteria, it will clog one of those tubes. And slowly, 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 you suffocate your dahlias. So number one, clean those vases. I actually put mine through the dishwasher. This is my mama. She's dead now, but I love this picture because she used to love to put dahlias on her hat and walk around. If that isn't just exquisite. This dahlia called Holly Hill Purely Purple is purely purple. This is actual real color. Purple is the rarest color of dahlias. You can tell I love my dahlias. Somebody caught this picture of me, and lo and behold, it actually won an award. And I will leave you with the idea that a white dahlia is not just a white dahlia. That is all the pictures I brought today.
Absolutely stunning, Deborah. Absolutely stunning. So, people, if you have more questions or comments for Deborah, you can either put them in the chat or you can maybe unmute yourselves and raise your hand. Deborah, if you want to stop sharing your screen, then I'll be able to see the other people. It was really, I had no idea there were so many different kinds of of shapes and colors, and it was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Just stunning. So wow, anyone else want to? Oh, Gillis, okay, let's hear it.
So in England, the dahlias we particularly love are the so-called Bishop series of dahlias, which there's Bishop of Llandaff, Bishop of York, Bishop of Canterbury, which are all single dahlias with bronze foliage. They're very, very dramatic. But we've tried growing them in California and we got completely wiped out with powdery mildew. I mean, just devastated. Whereas they grow beautifully in England. So what are we doing wrong?
You are doing nothing wrong, but mildew is ubiquitous in California. It is in the air. So start with a prophylactic cocktail that includes stylet oil quite early as the end of May, I would say, and do it at least once every 10 days or 2 weeks. And JMS stylet oil has to be ordered through the mail still. For some reason, the nurseries here haven't caught up to it. But the Bishop of Llandaff series is quite popular. There's also a series called Mystic that was bred in New Zealand. That is also that dark foliage, and it's really quite striking in a garden.
Okay, and are they less susceptible to powdery mildew, or it's just the same?
Everything is susceptible to powdery mildew, and the Bay Area is just teeming with it.
Okay. Okay, we'll try the stylet oil.
I'm sorry, Gillis, you might be rethinking the fact that you sold your Oxford house.
No, no, no. We're eager to get back, but we need to be able to grow our dahlias.
Thank you. Carrie, you have a
I
question.
just wanted to share, and you can check with Deborah on this. I had made a habit of going to Golden Gate Park Dahlia Gardens in the season, first thing Saturday morning, when all the volunteers are there, and they will answer your questions. They tell you all kinds of really good stuff when you come. And I don't know if they're in the way and I'm messing it up, but they're very happy to answer your questions early Saturday morning when they first get there, before all the visitors come. It's really nice. Used to be you could drive in too.
Carrie, you are the best, because I didn't say that yet. And I welcome everybody to come to Golden Gate Park to see the dahlias. It's free to the public, but particularly, as Carrie said, Saturday morning, many of us volunteers are there, and we love to answer the public's questions.
Really answer questions.
And I kind of call it my office hours, because that's when people bring me problem leaves, or they bring me a bloom that they can't identify, or questions. And it's great because you can see exactly what's going on in the garden right then. I would also just put in a plug for our Dahlia Society of California. For $10 a year, you can be a member, and every month you get an illustrated newsletter that tells you what you should be seeing in your garden and what you shouldn't be seeing in your garden for that time of year. And it's a great way of keeping up. Thank you, Carrie.
Awesome. Pam, you have a comment or question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So when is the Dahlia garden at its height? And also, you said you can't drive through. How far do you have to walk in?
Two questions. When is the Dahlia garden at its height? And I would say the end of July through August, September, and then starting to wane in October. But we do start getting first dahlias the end of April, as I said. So it's kind of fun to see how things are going. We have heard from our governor that potentially a lot of things will be changing in June. Cross your fingers. But right now, if you drive in, you have to park either outside the Arguello gate or outside the gate on Stanion, or where I like to park is by the tennis courts. And it's about a 10-minute hike in. And if you're not carrying shovels and rakes and lugging a red wagon full of cans of fertilizer and stuff, it's really not bad. So I hope that answers your questions, Pam.
Yes, thank you.
Landry.
You mentioned that people had a hard time last year with their dahlias, and Deborah, you had a theory about why last year was especially difficult. Can you tell the group?
Yes, thank you, Landry. Last year, as you know, around the whole West Coast, which is where most of the big commercial growers are right now, last year was on fire. We had really bizarre days here in the Bay Area. Most of you remember those really weird orange days. There was so much ash and stuff in the air. And normally ash is great for a garden. But for some reason, there was enough pollutants and other things that commercial dahlia people all across the United States started reporting in terrible, terrible tuber crops. And normally when a commercial grower goes online with the the sale, you've got 3 or 4 weeks to order things and stuff. And this year, people would go online and literally by the time they checked out and said with their cart, they got a note saying they were already sold out of the things that they had just been choosing 15 minutes ago. So there has been a real scurry and flurry of people trying to find things. So that was one of the reasons that I started putting together cuttings in January. And so I do have dahlias for sale. Thanks for reminding me, Landry. I sell them in 4x4 pots, in milk cartons, half-gallon milk cartons, and in gallon cartons. And they are $6, $9, and $12. So if you email me your email, I will send you a spreadsheet with the names and the sizes of things that I have hardened off. So that means they are ready to go in the ground. They have proven themselves. And every day I'm bringing things out of the greenhouse and they are getting hardened off. But the advantage with my stuff is that they are ready to go. There's no crossing your fingers and hoping you do everything right, and they're ready to go in the ground.
And Deborah, your email is, I'm going to put it in the chat.
Okay, Dahlia, Dahlia Dietz, Dietz @gmail.com.
Great. Great.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Landry.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Deborah? That was really a spectacular. Oh, Kate?
Can dahlias be grown in pots?
Dahlias can be grown in pots. I have actually seen the great big ones grown in 5-gallon buckets, but this guy really knew what he was doing, because the thing with pots, you still want them well drained. So every time you water them, the nutrients come out the bottom. So you have to be very smart about it. The easiest ones to grow in pots, it makes sense, are the open-centered ones, because they're just a little hardier and they're not as deep feeders as the great big ones. So I would recommend open centers for your pots, or maybe little pom-poms. Sometimes competitors, Kate, you asked about this, and only 2 dahlias are known for how small they are. The little mignon singles and pom-poms. You get extra points for tiny pom-poms. So some people find the crummiest area of their garden and put their pom-poms there so that maybe they'll be a little tinier and shriveled her up more. And some people put them in little nasty pots so that they kind of have to fight their way up. I don't know if that's dahlia cruelty or whatever, but those would be the only really, double dahlias that I would recommend in pots, unless you're really good at pot growing.
Thank you.
Well, and you mentioned hardiness, and I had skipped a question by Louise, who just wondered if some varieties just are hardier than others that you could recommend for some of us maybe who are starting for the first time with dahlia.
There are dahlias with training wheels. Dahlias that if you give them too much water, they're okay. Dahlias, if you don't give them quite enough, they still make it. And I would first of all say that the open centers are probably your weediest in terms of vigorosity. There's one, anything with Bloomquist on it. Bloomquist is a hybridizer right on the border between Washington and Canada. And for some reason, in that kind of tough environment, he breeds great dahlias, Bloomquist. Hollyhill tends to make some pretty snazzy dahlias, but some of his are divas. But I would say anything that was grown in that starts with Eden, Eden, or paradise means that it was bred right here in San Francisco. And so those are already acclimatized to our area and thrive here.
Awesome.
Giles or Jill? Was it
Gillis.
Jill?
Yeah, I mean, we grow the Bishop series dahlias in pots in England. They do fantastically well, and we use dilute tomato food to feed them because that produces a lot of flowers.
Yes.
And we give the dilute tomato food probably about half quarter strength every other time we water them, and they do fantastically well.
That's just fabulous. One of our growers in Golden Gate Park specializes in the dark foliage, and she usually grows one of the bishops and now a couple of the mystics and a couple of the new hybridizes with the dark foliage. So that's kind of fun. But I agree that dilute tomato food would be really, really great. Or any kind of dilute super bloom. Once you set bud, a dilute super bloom. And for those of you who aren't sure, a super bloom is anything with a low first number, a super high second number, and a medium third number. So I think I've used a 5, 55, 20. And I do that about a month before showtime. And it just kicks off my dahlias.
Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic information and so entertaining, Deborah. You are the best speaker. So much fun. We really loved it. So people, if you want to buy some of the dahlias that Deborah has grown, so again, they'd be plants, not tubers. Her email is in the chat, dahlia.dietz@gmail.com, and she says to email her, and then she'll send you the spreadsheet of what she has available, right, Deb? And then they do need to be picked up in San Francisco. But if a couple of us are buying, maybe one person could go pick them up. So we could work on that.
And I won't start selling until April 22nd. So, and you probably have even bigger choice later, but you could start reserving April 22nd. And I would wait until maybe March 1st, but start reserving first.
May 1st. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. So we'll thank you and applaud and let you go.
Thank you very much.
We loved your visit, and I hope to see you in Golden Gate Park.
I hope to see all of you there some Saturday morning. Bye.
Fantastic.
So what a fabulous presentation.
It was wonderful, and we thank Anna, who first told us about Deborah. Thank you very much, Anna. So before we all say goodbye, does anyone have announcements?